Chair, we're ready.
Ready. I'd like to call the meeting of the Johnson County Charter Commission to order on November 17th, 2021. I was going to say this is our 150th meeting, but it may just seem like that. Thank everybody on the commission for the amount of diligence and time you've spent doing this. It's an important event every 10 years, and we appreciate the effort. The first item on the agenda is roll call to determine the presence of a quorum. So Deputy Clerk Sater, if you would call the roll, please.
Wendy Bingesser.
Wendy Bingesser, present.
Thank you. Mike Boehm.
Mike Bain here.
Thank you. Karen Brownlee.
Karen Brownlee.
Thank you. Vicki Charlesworth.
Vicki Charlesworth, present.
Vicky says present on Zoom.
She is present on Zoom, and I can see her. Jim Denning. Jim Denning. Jane Dirks.
Jane Dirks here.
Thank you. Jimmy Gaona.
Jimmy Gaona present.
Thank you. Tedrick Hausch.
Tedrick here.
Thank you. Randy Hutchins. Randy Hutchins. Chris Iliff.
Here.
Thank you. Laura Klinging-Smith. Laura Klinging-Smith. Joy Costin.
Joy Costin here.
Joy Costin is present on Zoom. Brent McCune.
Brent McCune present on Zoom.
Present on Zoom.
He is present on Zoom. Eric Michelson.
Eric Michelson, present.
Thank you. Ed Peterson.
Ed Peterson, present on Zoom.
Ed Peterson is present on Zoom. Don Rattan. Thank you. Leslie Riviola.
Leslie Riverola is present on Zoom.
She is present on Zoom. Don Roberts. Don Roberts. Kyle Russell.
Kyle Russell present.
Thank you. Paula Swak.
Paula Schwak, present.
Thank you. Brenda Sharp.
Brenda Sharp, present.
Thank you. Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, present on Zoom.
Greg Shelton is present on Zoom. Greg Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Zach Thomas. Zach Thomas. Chair Musel.
Chair here.
I show we have 20 present and 5 that are absent at this time. If any come in, I will let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. 20 members of the commission does represent a quorum. The first item for action tonight is approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting, which was previously published and essentially contains the first reading of additional amendments. Are there any additions or corrections or changes to the agenda? If not, I would accept a motion to approve.
So
Sure.
moved.
Moved by Mayor Schwak and
Second.
seconded by Chris Iliff to approve the agenda as published. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. I might note for both the members of the commission on Zoom and the members of the public listening by Zoom, we were having a little bit of problem hearing people on the commission who are on Zoom, so we will see if we can continue to work on that. The next item on the agenda is to consider approval of the November 8th, 2021 meeting minutes. Any additions or corrections to the minutes that Linda circulated? If not, do I hear a motion to approve them as published?
Motion to approve is published.
Moved by Commissioner Smith and seconded by Commissioner Binghauser to approve the minutes as published. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries.
Who was the second on that?
Wendy,
Thank you.
There's no old business that I'm aware of. The only item of new business is to continue the first reading of the amendments. I do want to refresh ourselves and members of the public and members of the media about the process, because there's been some confusion as reported. What we are considering is amendments to the county charter that have been proposed by a member of the Charter Commission. Under our rules, the first reading of that proposed amendment is had, and the person can discuss it. We'll have brief discussion and a vote. If it receives 9 votes, it will move on to a second reading in front of the Charter Commission. At the second reading, an amendment requires 13 votes. If it receives 13 votes, it would then be placed on or reported to the county commission, which would be obligated to place it on the ballot at the November 2022 election. Following consideration of proposed amendments to the charter, we will also consider proposed recommendations of the Charter Commission to the County Commission, for the County Commission then to consider whether or not to act on those. There has been at least media reports that a proposed amendment, once proposed, is automatically a Charter Commission recommendation to the County Commission, and that's simply not the statutory process or the rules that we've established of this body. And I think it's important that we try to be accurate so that citizens know what the process is. So what we're going to do today is consider additional proposed amendments on a first reading to see if they will receive 9 votes to move on to a second reading. I am at least somewhat optimistic we can get through the remainder of these proposed amendments in first reading tonight. We will not move to the second reading. I don't anticipate moving to the second reading on any proposed amendment this evening, but saving those for our December 6th meeting. That will require me to be a bit stricter as your chairman in imposing time limits on individual proposed amendments. I'd indicated last meeting that we would limit those to 20 minutes with some presentation by the proponent and then discussion by the rest of the commission. I was not very good at sticking to that time limit at our November 8th meeting. I'm going to try to be a little stricter this time so we can get through these. Since the last meeting, we moved 2 amendments, proposed amendments to second reading. One was that by Randy Hutchins to consider a form of election of trustee for the unincorporated area. The other was a proposal by Commissioner Smith to require special elections for vacancies on the county commission. Both of those will be considered on second reading. Both of those, I think, require some additional discussion and detail before we can consider them. In addition, we agreed by consensus that the proposal to have the county appraiser elected instead of appointed would violate Kansas statute, and so that consideration as an amendment will not be made by this commission. It's still potential that Mr. Hutchins, I think the sponsor of that, will bring it forward as a recommendation to ask the county commission to seek that statutory change. And then I've confirmed today, Commissioner Smith had a proposal with respect to department directors and agency executive directors with respect to residency. And Greg informed me today that he is going to withdraw that and will not be bringing that back to us. So we've narrowed it down some. We have consolidated 2 of the proposed amendments today with respect to the Health Advisory Board. So I think we can get through these with a little more speed than we did last week, understanding again that it's important to deliberate, and for those that receive sufficient votes, we'll have longer periods of deliberation at the second reading. Finally, I'm going to break for about 5 minutes, somewhere around 5 o'clock, so that members of the commission can take a personal break as opposed to forcing you to miss part of a discussion on any item. We'll do that hopefully between 2 proposed amendments. Anything else, Linda?
No, sir.
Okay, with that, then we're going to move on to the first proposed amendment, which is the Health and Safety Advisory Council. And if you will, this is a combined version of 2 different amendments, one submitted by Commissioner Costin, one submitted by Commissioner Peterson. They have combined theirs, and I'll ask Linda to read that. It is also in your agenda.
Resubmitted one in place of the two proposed originally. In times of emergency, the Board of County Commissioners shall form a Health and Safety Advisory Council, which shall provide guidance when the when the BOCC acts as the Board of Health or exercises other emergency powers. The Health Advisory Council shall be composed of representatives of interested groups and parties as determined by the BOCC, including but not limited to physicians, patients, caregivers, pharmacies, hospitals, schools, religious organizations, first responders, possibility of some other one there, and the general public.
I will turn the floor over to either Commissioner Peterson or Commissioner Costin, whoever wants to be the first proponent of this proposed amendment to the Home Rule Charter.
Chair, if I could state that Laura Klingensmith has arrived at the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Musil, this is Joy Costin. I would be
Joy?
happy. Can you hear me?
One moment.
Okay.
One moment.
Can you hear me?
Ed, can you try to speak, please?
We can see Joy. Joy is trying to speak, but we can't hear her. And I don't see Ed.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? This is Ed Peterson.
Ed, we cannot hear you at this time.
Okay. I'm not muted, so sorry.
Yeah, I'm not either. I think it's on their end.
Hi, this is Erin with the CMO's office. It is on
Do you have any
the
idea
end
about,
here at
should we go on to
the
the
building.
next one maybe? Since it's from Mayor Michelson and he's here. Let's do that. Let's go ahead. Mike, Eric, are you prepared to move on to your proposal on the compensation of commissioners?
But we can't hear them. There's a problem with the audio
I am.
bridge.
Can they hear me on Zoom?
Joy, can you hear us when we're speaking?
Yes,
Yes.
I can.
Okay.
Microphone close to them, it'll transfer.
Sure, if we can. Oh. Okay, let's try it with the Health Advisory Committee. Joy or Ed, we're going to use you through the phone and hope this works. If it doesn't, we'll move on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
You know what? Please speak up, but we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to yield the floor to Ed and let him speak to this amendment.
Am I coming through all right?
Yeah, all right is a subjective measure.
Okay. Well, I will speak up and hope that this translates. Joy and I got together after these proposals. Obviously, we had similar thoughts. We feel that the pandemic and the county response to that was certainly not what anybody would desire. I think, in my view, most people on any side of that issue came away dissatisfied with the approach that was required of the county in this particular instance. We feel that going forward, there's got to be a better way of formulating a community-wide approach to these community-wide crises. And we looked around. Other areas of the country have different approaches. There's problems with each of those. There's advantages to each of those. We feel that in our particular situation, an advisory type of board to be created by the Board of County Commissioners would allow for all of various interests to come together and formulate the response, as opposed to our current situation, which requires that one or two individuals in the health department make recommendations, which the elected Board of County Commissioners then acts upon. We feel that has created a divisive political situation in Johnson County. That's unusual for us. We usually pull together. And we think that this broader based board would allow groups that have interest to have representation in the decision-making and the recommendation. Now, I want to emphasize the Board of County Commissioners would end up making the final decision, but the recommendations would be formed through a somewhat consensus building process of the advisory board. One point I would make, it is my view, and Cindy Dunham may want to add to this, that the Board of County Commissioners could create such a board now. But I believe it's important for us in this time as a Charter Commission to speak out, recommend that we believe this system needs to be improved. This is a proper way to do so. And by our speaking out and suggesting that this become part of the charter, I think we encourage action and certainly would put this before the public to give the public a chance to speak on whether they want to make this change or not. So again, we would create this advisory board, or have the board create the advisory board. They would name the interested groups. That could change from time to time. And then that group would be available from time to time as the Board of County Commission needed it to formulate public recommendations. Joy, do you want to add anything to that?
No, Ed, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think both of us have in mind a way to approach county emergencies in a way that would bring a collective of stakeholders together to make sure that we have a consensus of some sort that we can rally behind. So I think that you've spoken to this very well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we'd answer any questions.
Ed and Joy, let me bring up a couple things that I think are consistent with what we talked about last week. This is, I guess, if you will, a conceptual vote. I think there would need to be some detail added if this receives 9 votes, because I don't know what in an emergency means, who declares it, under what circumstances, and we would need to provide some detail about exactly what groups are represented and how they are selected, or at least give that authority to the Board of County Commissioners. So again, we're not voting on a final detailed proposal here, as opposed to a concept of requiring a county health and safety advisory council. Other questions or comments from members of the commission? Mayor Bain.
I have similar concerns that Greg had. What is a time of emergency? I think in practice, this makes some sense, but if you only put it in place when you have an emergency, you're scrambling around while the pandemic is ravaging ahead, as opposed to having a standing board that meets once a year to say, if we need you, but you have an identified group in advance that's really a standing committee as opposed to just assembled. I think we're shoving 2 things into this statement. One is health and one is safety. If the Joplin tornado hits Johnson County and we declare a state of emergency, this list of recommended committee members really aren't the experts we need in the room. So I think we need to be careful on that aspect as well. Just general comments. Again, if we're going to refine this, those are the kind of things I'd want to know about.
Mayor
Mr.
Michelson.
Chairman, if I could make one comment in response.
I tend to agree with the comments of Mayor Boehm and the chair on this. I would also observe and recall that when we heard from the Johnson County Department of Health and Environment during the presentation phase, they indicated they already had in the works I think they called it a Public Health Leadership Council, with this very intent in mind, without a charter amendment. But it would, learning from what the experience of the pandemic, I think they acknowledged that
a concept like this could be beneficial. So if this advances, and I'm given that, especially the Johnson County Health Department of Environment and some of the commissioners here believe there's some improvements to be made, I'm inclined to support it as a concept. I'm not sure it's a charter amendment yet. And maybe, Chair, if it does advance, we might hear from the Department of Health and Environment again about what they have already going in this regard, and we kind of have the discussion as to whether to go with what they're suggesting with this or something different. Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to see if there's anybody else in the room before we go to Zoom. So is there anybody else in the room? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some of the same concerns that have been voiced already, but I thought I heard the bringer of the proposed amendment say that the board already has this power. I mean, there's precedent set. They already had a commission or a board or whatever in this pandemic. Is it really necessary to amend the charter for something they can already do?
I think we agree that there is already that power there, and Ed spoke to that. So that's another question, I think, for the commission. Ms. Rattan?
Just to add, as we're defining what an emergency is, we need to also define what the downside of that is. So when to bring the super team together, but when to disband the super team here. And so I would say also establish criteria to disband or to go to the once, we may go to once a week or once a month in times of emergency, but when do you go back down and decrease that frequency and disband the emergency status and add some detail to that?
I want to at least make clear my view of how we act on this commission. It's only my opinion. It's not for anybody else, but I may vote to move something forward without any intention at the time of voting to make it a charter amendment. Because some of these things do need perhaps fleshed out. And I've got to be convinced that if the county commission already has the authority, is there a reason to force it into what I consider the constitution of the county? So I think that kind of gets to, Greg, your point, and maybe Eric's too, and Mike. So if they can already do this, we need to be very careful about forcing them and how we force them to do it as a charter amendment. So Jimmy first, Commissioner Guyana, and then Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Jimmy Guyana here. I kind of would even want some insight, and I echo what other items have been said, but I want some insight on the Emergency Management Division of Johnson County and how it can be incorporated, since we don't want to have a redundant system. So if anyone's been through that office, they have like 40 chairs with people sitting manning them. Why can't we just add a few more chairs to something to that? I'm not against it for it. I'm just trying to understand a second council when we already have an emergency management system. And I'll wait for Zoom for them to answer that question.
Brenda, and then Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this in concept. I think I agree with some. I'd like to see more criteria. If I could, I would like to suggest that any list of groups or experts, if you will, would also include the local federally qualified health center that serves our county's uninsured and low-income patients who were extraordinarily hard hit during this last pandemic, and then mental health professionals as well, given the extreme stress and strain that placed on many people in our community as well.
Thank you. Mr. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question would be, is this really about health outcomes or is it about safety? And to the point that some have made already, is there already the emergency procedures that municipalities have in place, county does, state does? If the issue is health, does this need to be drawn more narrowly? And I know some of us have questioned, do we have properly qualified people making the health decisions? And the concern there is, do they have a background in human health and public health rather than more of an animal science background? I think that has been a major concern, but it just needs to be clarified, what's the real intent? Is it health or is it emergency type situations? Thank you.
Ed and Joy, we're going to let you, I'm going to put you off till the end and let you respond to these questions. I hope you're keeping track because we have some other Zoom comments. Let's go ahead to the Zoom. Who do we have there?
Greg Shelton. Greg Shelton.
Thank you, Linda, and commission members. I just picking up on some of the commentary there. I think it's important, from my professional perspective, we often talk about health and safety as one and the same. So, I wouldn't necessarily divorce the two because in times of emergency, there are often serious health risks involved. So as we consider this and formulating this as a potential charter amendment, I think that's really important that we have a shared understanding that health leads to higher levels of safety, and safety will lead to better health outcomes, to Commissioner Brownlee's point. So as we do move this forward or choose to move this into a second reading, I agree we need to clarify the definition of those two terms and whether or not we want to refer to them in a singular form or a separate form, but either way, there's an interrelationship there that we need to acknowledge.
Next on Zoom.
Ed Peterson.
Oh.
Are there others who have questions before I respond?
Are there other Zoom questions?
No one
or
else.
Comments? Okay.
No one else has
Here in the room,
hand up.
Commissioner House. Tedrick, go ahead and then we'll let Joy and Ed respond.
I just had a question about the selection process for the various constituencies. I think that we've seen that with this last pandemic, it's been a divisive topic, and you can always find someone with a viewpoint at either extreme end of things. And to me, that's going to be an issue, even if we put this in as part of the structure.
No one else here?
Okay.
I see no one else here in the room. So go ahead, Ed or Joy, would you respond to the questions and comments, please?
Let me get started. First of all, on the issue of whether the commission actually has the power, I believe they do, but I also think this is the sort of change that if this commission feels strongly that needs to be made, that it's worth putting it into the charter to make sure that it happens. And I think I agree that we need to flesh this out. I really would respect the expertise that this commission brings to bear to perhaps modify this, and I think it can be made much better. Joy and I agreed that you can't really deal with a health issue like we just had with the pandemic, and I guess still have, I should say, without considering public safety. And there is a distinction here between what this group would deal with and what the current administration deals with in times of emergency. We have plans in place for hazardous waste incidents or tornadoes or large storm damage, that sort of thing. Emergency preparedness deals with all that. This is a different type of animal that we had to deal with the pandemic. And there are safety aspects to it, and that's why we included safety here. It was not our intent that this would be a group that oversees all public safety, but just these times of emergency. Times of emergency needs to be further defined, but I think the past couple of years have clearly fallen into that category, and we should be able to find a description of that. To respond to Mayor Boehm, I think this would need to be an ongoing effort. I don't think they need to be a group that meets weekly or monthly, but I do think there needs to be an assemblage periodically to allow these people to develop working relationships. So I would see it as something other than an incident-specific group, but something that is somewhat of a standing committee. And, you know, I'm sure that they could bring expertise on other issues and could be used from time to time, even though it's not an emergency. That could be done at the election of the Board of County Commissioners or the Health Department. And again, I think that this is at least a step toward better resolution of these types of issues. And that's why I think it's important for our commission here to have this discussion and see if we can refine this into something that would be an appropriate amendment to the charter. Joy, do you want to add anything?
No, well, the only thing I would add is that the notion of health and safety as it pertains to this amendment really doesn't have much specifically to do with health outcomes per se. We are not going to have markers or measures or of health outcomes, but it is more about making sure that we have a consistent group of stakeholders who are representatives of these different entities who have a shared understanding of the health of the crisis that's emerging, and also a shared expertise, or at least expertise that they can share to make sure that we get through that crisis in a good way. So I think this is more about the environment that we've just lived through and not anything that is already covered under like Ed said, under the emergency preparedness or anything like that.
Jimmy Gaona.
So Jim McGann here, just in review for document review for County Emergency Operations Plan draft. They're going to have a robust after action review starting in 2023 with response to the COVID. So I think there's something here online. I don't know if we need to do a little more homework, but it sounds like the county's driving that way. Now, how we can ask to amend that emergency management system in preparedness for any emergency would be proper to me. That makes sense to me, I guess, is what so there's something already going on.
We're about at our 20 minutes. I'm going to ask Joy and Ed. I heard two different concepts there. Ed said we need to define emergency, but then I think both of you indicated maybe it ought to be a standing group. So if it's a standing group, we don't need to define emergency. Whoops. Do you have a preference that you'd put before the commission now before we vote to see if it moves to second reading?
Well,
as to whether this is to be formed only in emergencies as originally submitted now, or would be a standing body that would be looked to more in emergencies?
Ed, I'll chime in and then you can correct me if you have a different opinion. I think the county would be better served if it were a standing committee that had members that rotated on the standing committee, and maybe they only met every 6 months, maybe it's once a year, but then they would be called into action should an emergency occur. That's kind of how I envisioned it. Ed,
I concur in that.
So I think if we're going to get a motion and a second on this to vote on it, we will be voting on it as the creation, to move to second reading, the creation of a standing Health and Safety Advisory Committee with other details to be worked out before we would ever consider a second reading. Ed or Joy, do you want to make the motion and the other one second it so we can move to a vote?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman, as you articulated it.
We have to go through some tricks on Linda's phone to get you guys live in our room, so patience.
You're on now.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we move this proposed amendment forward, creating a standing committee to deal with public health and safety in times of emergency that would be called upon in particular in such times of emergency.
And I second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any other brief discussion before we vote on the first reading to see if there are 9 votes to move it to second reading? Seeing none, Ms. Sater, would you recall the roll?
Wendy Bingesser.
Wendy Bingesser, no.
That's a no. Mike Bain.
Yes, I want to hear more, but I'm going to have a high standard to vote for it. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Karen Brownlee.
Brownlee, no.
That's a no. Vicky Charlesworth.
Vicky Charlesworth, yes.
Vicky, could you state that again, please?
Vicky Charlesworth, yes.
Thank you. Jim Denning. Jim Denning is absent. I apologize. Jane Dirks.
Jane Dirks, no.
Jane Dirks says no. Jimmy Gaona.
Jimmy Gaona says no.
Jimmy Gaona, no. Tedrick Hausch.
No.
That is a no. Randy Hutchins is absent. Chris Iliff.
Yes.
That's a yes. Laura Klingensmith. Laura Klingensmith is a no. Joy Costin.
Joy Costin, yes.
I'm sorry. Joy, could you state that again, please?
Joy Costin, yes.
Thank you. Brent McCune.
Brent McCune is no. That is a no.
Brent McCune, was that a no?
That is correct. No.
Thank you. Eric Michelson.
Eric Michelson, yes.
That's a yes. Ed Peterson.
Ed Peterson, yes.
Don Rattan. Yes. Leslie Riviola.
Leslie Riverola is no.
Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, no.
And Don Roberts did come into the meeting at 4:17. Kyle Russell.
Kyle Russell, yes.
Kyle Russell was a yes. Paula Swak.
I feel like Mayor Boehm does, but I'll vote yes so we can have additional discussion.
And Paula Swak was yes. Brenda Sharp.
Brenda Sharp, yes.
That's a yes. Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, yes.
Greg Shelton, was that a yes?
Yes, correct.
Greg Smith.
No.
That's a no. Zach Thomas is absent. And Chair Musel.
The chair will vote yes. I think that's the 12th vote, so it's moving forward. I'm going to challenge anybody that moves on to second reading to come back with a specific proposal in language that they can work out with Cynthia Dunham or others, because we are not going, I do not want this body to be drafting something or amending a bunch of things when we get to second reading. So Ed and Joy, you're the first guinea pigs. Randy had his last week, and Greg, I think you had yours, but yours was fairly specific that we need to, when we get to second reading, have some specific language that we can consider.
Excuse me, Randy Hutchins is present on Zoom.
10 no's.
Thank you. The next item on the list is the proposal to deal with compensation of Board of County Commissioner members, brought to us by Mayor Michelson. Ms. Sater, would you read the proposal? And this is a modified one, if I remember right.
Resubmitted with a new description for the first proposal under Board of County Commissioners topic. Delete all text from section 2.05, compensation, and replace with the following. Each commissioner and the chair shall receive an annual salary set at the 2021 salary amount, subject to annual adjustment of 3% or consumer price index starting in 2022. They shall receive non-cash employee benefits compensated with those offered to county management employees.
Commensurate with those offered to county management employees. Eric, before you go, the current section 2.05 that you're replacing reads as follows. The commission shall continue to determine the salary and benefits of its members by resolution, period. The chair shall receive additional compensation no less than 25% of the base commission of commissioners. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just say this is as you can see, a very specific proposal, but I'm not wed to the numbers and the specific language. So if the concept advances, I'm open to amendment. There's probably 25 different opinions on what the right salary is. This is more just designed to get at the right process, the right mechanism, and some safeguards. When I first read this, what the chair stated is the current version of 2.05, it struck me that no elected body should have unfettered discretion to set its own salary with taxpayer money. That's an inherent conflict of interest in that decision. Sometimes there's no alternative to that, but here we are the alternative to that. That is sort of a higher body that meets every 10 years to put a better mechanism in place. That bothered me. There's potential for problems on both ends. The first one, the original proposal, was to put some type of an upper limit on that ability to set their own salary. The suggestion was is a cost of living type of an adjustment. Fortunately, I've gotten a lot of feedback on this from current and former commissioners and others. We haven't had a problem with that in Johnson County. But problems do exist. You don't have to look far. Do a Google search of Bell, California as one example of, unlimited discretion to set your own pay is never a good idea for the potential for abuse on the high end. And we could easily guard against that with a simple phrase in the charter. The other potential for problem, I think, has been a problem in a county that otherwise runs very, very well, and I don't think is in need of much change. As I looked into this, I think they have erred. Perhaps we've been blessed with commissioners who not only haven't abused it, but they stopped giving themselves cost of living adjustments about a decade ago. And understandably so. This is a political landmine for any elected official. And yes, there's a 4-year face the voters cure, but a lot of damage and problems can come in 4 years and before the next election. And the downside risk is important as well. Paying elected officials too little limits your pool of qualified applicants. And those who do serve, if they're not affluent enough, may have to limit the amount of time they can give to that job. They may have dependents, they may not have a high salary, they may have to earn a living. So I think this has become a full-time job from what I understand for most, if not all commissioners, particularly in the last 2 years. The amount of work, the amount of sometimes abuse that they have to take. I've become, quite frankly, more concerned, especially with this excellent track record of commissioners that we've had, that they're not paying themselves enough. And it's just not politically fair to ask them to vote on their own pay increases, even to keep up with inflation. like I said, there's probably 25 different opinions as to what the exact right amount is, but if we assume that the right amount was in 2012 at $75,000 for the chair and $47,000 and change for the commissioners, and that historical chart, hopefully you've seen it, it's in your packet, there's been no cost of living adjustments since then. In the case of the commissioners for about a decade and the chair for slightly less than that. This year, inflation is running at 6%. So that's a 6% pay cut in real money terms for all these commissioners this year. You add that to whatever the last 10 years has been, 3% inflation average. You know, their pay has been going down every year arbitrarily by the amount of inflation. So the concept here is really simple. It's just to put, I would like to take this off their plate altogether and just say we set it at 2021 rates. It goes up by either 3% or the consumer price index. I'm certainly open to either one or a better suggestion. And then the benefits, I don't think they should be setting their own benefits either, but I think the easy fix there is to just say they get whatever the management gets in terms of health insurance options and so forth. So it started out as just, this is not a best practice on paper. Upon investigation, I'm concerned that in practice, they've been paying themselves too little because it's of the political challenges with this while the demands have gone up and the cost of living has gone up. So I thought this would be something we could improve for the county. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I have a question as we start. Maybe, Maury, do you know this? We have the information about the current salaries. What is the benefit structure? Do you know what the benefit structure is for the 6 commissioners and the chair?
I believe generally, Mr. Chairman, the same access to benefits as any full-time county employee.
But, I mean, I assume management employees have a match for their retirement account, health benefits for themselves, paid for partly by the county for their dependents. Are all those same advantages given to the current commissioners?
Yes.
Yeah. So that part of the mayor's proposal wouldn't change the existing practice. That's right, okay. All right, I saw hands somewhere. Mayor Schwak.
I have just one question, and that would be if you're talking about the consumer price index, I presume we're talking CPW and not something else? As in wage earners?
You want to respond?
Sure, I would defer to the expertise of others, what the right metric is. Sounds like maybe that's the better one.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Russell, Kyle.
I support the concept. I'm more supportive of this concept than I was the previously drafted proposal. I think I agree with Mayor Michelson. The bigger problem here is not paying commissioners enough and limiting our pool of people who are interested and can afford to serve. I believe from speaking with current and former commissioners also that this is a full-time job and it should be compensated accordingly. And I don't think it is appropriate. I understand why there have been no cost of living increases for the last decade because people tend to be petrified to vote to raise their own salaries. And I understand why that is. I agree with taking it out of their hands. My question would be, I would be actually open. I'll vote for this conceptually to move forward, but I would actually be open to setting the baseline higher than the 2021 levels due to the lack of increases for the last 10 years. I would also ask, and I don't know if Maury or anyone else here knows this, but what is the compensation of the other county elected officials, the sheriff and the DA, and how is it determined? I just don't know whether we would want to include something about the same conceptually, the automatic sort of increases for other elected officials as well, even though it's not in the current charter if we're going to propose something like this as to whether we should include them as well. But regardless, I plan to vote to move this forward.
Other comments? Oh, you want to answer that, Maury?
Well, to say I don't know, I'll have to get those annual salaries for you. If I recall correctly, Commissioner, there's no automatic adjustments to those. Those take board action to adjust.
And I don't know, are those set by, I would also want to know, are those set by the county commission or by the offices themselves? And if you don't know,
I do know the sheriff's is set by the county commissioners. I'd have to go back and check on the district attorney.
Mayor Boehm and then Mr. Guyana.
Mike Boehm, the original proposal in my mind was we're forcing them to go CPI every year. Otherwise, you're going to a voters and the cost of an election every once in a while to do an in. So I thought that was bad. The current proposal just puts that in place. I still think we're a citizen legislature, and these are not career and professional jobs that need to keep up with inflation and whatnot. The cost of being a commissioner, if you're relying on it for your family income, you're putting yourself at peril because voters may decide you don't have that income on any 4-year cycle. Will I get paid? We take action when we need to. I don't think that's a bad thing if you over abuse it. I think we have a solution looking for a problem based on our history in Johnson County. If you think you need more money based on what your challenges are as a commissioner, you need to explain that to the voters. Do it yourself, and you have consequences if the people don't agree with you. I think we learned years ago when school finance picked the base aid per pupil number by, we got 51% of the voters in the legislature to move it forward, regardless of what that number is. We're setting ourselves up here too. As Kyle said, maybe it's too low already, maybe it's not. But to just grab a number and then start increasing it from there without any thought or study isn't responsible either. I don't know that I'll vote no or yes, but those are concerns I have.
Jimmy?
Thank you, Chair. Jimmy Gayona here. I think it is high time to do some type of adjustments. I get the putting it out there as election doesn't look well. But I also wanted to kind of go the other side of it is maybe we can get information from the county on what's the requirement of work. Right? So if you're in a job and it's full-time, I mean, you work until your job's over. So that's really tough in a position with that Mayor brought up, Mayor Boehm Mike here brought up. So I'm trying to understand if it is a full-time job, are you there Monday through Friday plus other things? I know we're getting really in the weeds here, but if we're going to do this, I think have an establishment set of, you got to have requirements to meet in order to get paid. I don't know what those are, if there is any.
Commissioner House?
I think it'd be interesting if it came to a county vote because the electors would be saying, are we paying these people enough? And I think that'd be, I don't know how it would go, but it'd be an interesting vote. I was looking at how Congress does this, and they have passed similar legislation that allows them, I believe, to have a cost of living increase, but they haven't done it since 2009. Someone will propose we freeze this and not do it. So even if we pass it, we may face the same political dilemma of someone saying, I don't want the pay raise, and people vote on it. And my other question was, I don't know what other counties and the state legislature does with respect to this process.
Senator Smith and Senator Brownlee can probably tell you about the robust compensation of state legislators. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, the Kansas legislature has the exact same power. They can raise their pay. They haven't done it in decades. Honestly, I'm over 60 years old and I can't remember the last time they did it. Base pay for a state legislature, whether you're a representative or a senator, $8,000. That's it. And then you get some daily per diem, which comes out to about 20 grand a year. I can tell you, when I was in the legislature, I took a serious pay cut to be there. It wasn't about pay. As I understand this proposal, it's a guaranteed 3%. I think a lot of people in Johnson County would like a job with a guaranteed 3% because they've suffered that same 6% real dollar cut too. So I can't support this proposal.
Can I respond, Chair, to
Sure,
a
Mayor.
couple of these things? Yeah, I mean, 3%, that's why I offered an alternative of the consumer price. You know, if the wage index only goes up 1%, you know, maybe it only goes up 1% that year. If it goes down, it doesn't go up at all. That's probably better, quite frankly, than 3% might be too low in a 6% year like we're in right now. The big difference with the legislature, and I, you know, respecting your service, the amount of time you and others put in there, I think they're underpaid as well, quite frankly. And that's a bit of a problem and a hindrance getting good people to run currently. But the big difference here is they don't have, to my knowledge, a commission like this that meets, that gets to set their rules every 10 years and help them with these political problems, which is really what it is, why they haven't done that. We do, that's what we're here for, and so it's a relatively easy compared to the legislature, a big difference. One comment, Tedrick, I'm not sure I understood one of your points, but the way I would envision this, if possible, is we set it, if this passes at whatever it is, any individual commissioner without a vote could decline to accept some or part of their wages or benefits. I don't think that will be an issue at all. And then when they get replaced, the next commissioner would not be bound by that decision. The salary would still be available to them, but I don't think we would need to go to a vote to have somebody who was affluent and was not interested in the money to turn that down. That would certainly my intent anyway, that would be possible.
Other comments in the room here before we go to Zoom?
May I make one? My concern is this becomes the standard for the employee.
Mike, use your mic.
My concern is this becomes the standard for the employees because the elected officials could get larger or smaller raises than you're going to give your employee base. And that becomes a standard that I don't know that we want to put our leaders in a position to go, that's what they got, that's what you all get. Because the real work is happening in the staff level, no offense to the elected, but we know.
Is there anybody on Zoom that would like to comment? We have a few minutes of our 20 minutes left. Ed Peterson?
1 second, Ed. Go ahead, Ed.
Well, for what it's worth, I could.
Hang on, Ed.
Ed, go ahead.
That was more of my voice than even I would like to hear. For what it's worth, my experience was I was fortunate enough, I had a flexible type of job as a private attorney that, I could squeeze in the work and still maintain some of my duties as an attorney. I did experience a decrease in my overall income from the law practice that equaled the money that I was getting as a county commissioner. So it worked out nicely for me in that regard. But it was a very clear indicator of the demands of the county commission job and the impact that can have on someone's real job, if you will. And I have mixed feelings about whether or not this is completely a full-time job. There are times when it takes more than 40 hours a week. A lot of those hours are not 9 to 5 hours. You're going to city council meetings or certain committee meetings, visiting with interested groups like chambers of commerce and so forth. But so you can squeeze some of that in, and sometimes the work is maybe only a couple of days worth of work every week, but a lot of that work comes during daytime hours. The board and the meetings weekly are on Thursdays, and that pretty much eats up all of a day on Thursday. I definitely think there needs to be an adjustment for pay just to bring this into line with what the salary was when this project started in 2002. So, I think there needs to be some adjustment. Maybe I would favor moving this forward. I think there might need to be some additional consideration on how the adjustments are made and structured. Perhaps that doesn't need to happen every single year. But I do think, from my experience, these are more than city council type jobs. They're more demanding than that. And if you want a commissioner that's really going to apply themselves and do the work, there needs to be commensurate compensation. And so I'll vote to move this project or this particular amendment forward.
Anybody else on Zoom?
Please raise your hand if there's anyone else on Zoom.
Okay. Commissioner Brownlee, and then Commissioner Bamian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was in the Senate, I happened to vote for a pay raise that was proposed by former Senator Rich Becker and Rip Gooch, and my husband thought I had lost my mind. But truly, the pay is way too low in the legislature. So that was a very honest vote for me. And currently, the Olathe City Council enjoys this very same arrangement, that it's an automatic CPI increase annually. I personally am of the belief that people should be properly compensated. And it is very difficult for a body to vote their own pay raise. So I support this.
Commissioner Sharp? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss somebody? Oh, Mike.
I've had my opportunity. A couple things. One, a 3% or less increase isn't going to make someone's decision to or not to run.
Exactly.
It's the base pay that we are at now. And I think we need to put faith in our current electeds to determine what that needs to be. Two, I'm going to put Maury on this spot here. I'm going to ask the question because he's the staff member in the room. Do we have COLAs for our employees? Or is it always merit-based? And do we want COLAs versus merit-based? And what challenge does that put the county manager in the budget office and the finance office and everybody else if there's a set number for the 7 that's not applicable to anyone else?
So to answer your question, Commissioner, Mayor, no, we do not give cost of living adjustments for employees. It has always been, in my memory, merit-based.
Okay, now Brenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to vote in favor of this tonight, hoping that there will be some additional tweaks, but I believe that at least some type of adjustment and a livable wage for the kind of work that's required of our commissioners is really important to diversifying the candidates, including women and people of color who are willing to run for these kinds of positions. Right now, it seems to lean more towards people employed in the service industry that Ed mentioned that have that ability to have a job that allows you to take on something like this on the side. A lot of other workers, that's just simply not an option, and they would have to give up some part of their job or wages. And so I will be voting to support this and hoping that Commissioner Michelson has some time to reflect and get some additional language together before the next reading.
Anybody else in the room or on Zoom? I'll make a quick comment. I'll vote tonight to forward this, but I will vote for approval only of something that says the commissioners raise their salary, but they're not entitled to it unless they're reelected into the seat. That was one of the original 13 Bill of Rights amendments that was proposed and wasn't adopted. It's now been adopted. So you can vote to raise your pay, but you don't get it unless you convince the electorate to move into it. That's a proposal I could support. I don't like putting into any constitutional thing an automatic idea, because then there's no opportunity to raise it or lower it by the commission themselves. The reason we've been frozen since 2011, I think, is because of the recession. And they kicked it back when Chairman Eilert became chair, and they kicked it back because of the circumstances then. I'm just worried about locking something in. But I know how hard it is, because I went through this on city council, and we do it about every 4 years. There'd be a 8% raise, and we'd get screamed at for that. So I proposed a COLA every year. And the first paragraph of the Star was, Musil wants a raise every year. So it's a political problem, but I don't want to lock it in unless it's something that gives the commission the authority to do it, which they already have, but that they don't get to take the raise unless they're reelected into the position. So with that and no other focus on Zoom, Linda, would you call the roll? Oh, I guess we need a motion, Mike, Eric, calling you Mike. Got too many mics.
You're not the first one. I'm going to move to advance the concept of setting some parameters around commissioner pay, taking this off of their plate. I'll advance, the motion will include the specific language I've suggested, but with the intent being that would be subject to substantial revision and input from the commissioners if it should advance, is my motion.
Seconded by Kyle Russell. Please call the roll. We'll break right after this vote for 5 minutes.
Wendy Bingesser.
Wendy Bingesser, no.
That's a no. Mike Boehm. That's a no. Karen Brownlee.
Brownlee, yes.
That's a yes. Vicky Charlesworth.
Vicky Charlesworth, yes.
Jane Dirks.
Jane Dirks, yes.
That's a yes. Jimmy Gaona.
Jimmy Gaona, yes.
That's a yes. Tedrick Hausch.
No.
That's a no. And I will state that Randy Hutchins came in actually back at 4:16 p.m. He is on Zoom.
Randy Hutchins, yes.
Thank you, Randy. That's a yes. Chris Eilis.
Yes.
Laura Clinging Smith.
Laura Clinging Smith, yes.
That's a yes. Joy Costin.
Joy Costin, yes.
Brent McCune.
Brent McCune is yes.
Eric Michelson.
Eric Michelson, yes.
That's a yes. Ed Peterson.
Ed Peterson, yes.
Don Rattan.
Yes.
That's a yes. Leslie Riviola.
Leslie Riverola is no.
Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, yes.
Kyle Russell.
Kyle Russell, yes.
That's a yes. Paula Swak.
Yes.
That's a yes. Brenda Sharp.
Brenda Sharp is a yes.
That's a yes. Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, yes.
Greg Smith. That's a no. And Chair Musil.
Yes.
I have 18 yes, 5 no.
We'll take a 5-minute break before we move on to our next item, which I believe is Mayor Michelson's proposal on an off-year chair election. So we'll be back at 5:18.
Zoom audio test, Zoom audio test. Zoom audio test, Zoom audio test. Zoom audio test, Zoom audio test.
Yeah, the mics are live still.
But I have indirect relationship with a couple of people. That helped him. That one guy that's in federal prison.
Networking. Yeah, as soon as I switch to the echo.
Still 5. At 5 o'clock came and I started getting after it.
That's
When the book is written on this, it's gonna be. Minimum 12, but I'll go 17 to 24. Yeah, I gotta be busy though, so like this is the atmosphere. That does, yeah, because and I have my own. Yeah, you think about it, right? And that's, yeah, so for me, when I remodel my house. I'll work till.
Zoom audio test, Zoom audio test. No.
Oh, yeah. It's that and driving. I've realized driving is actually, like, I want to do, like, I'll have to have a sunflower seed or something, just like gum or something. Keep it going. I'm just in a
Zoom
car.
audio test, Zoom audio test.
Yeah. Well, I need the car. I'm just like, that's why I want to do something. Yeah, I'm listening to
How are
whatever
you?
radio, whatever book. I was like,
Pretty good.
You know.
Figured out.
I'm supposed to reach out to him and get him access.
Zoom audio test, Zoom audio test.
10% the seat.
Zoom audio test, Zoom audio test.
They already have combined.
Is that right?
Are we on the echo?
Maybe I'll change my mind on second.
We are. No audio.
Together. So they've already working together. Development in the area. So I don't see how they could, why they wouldn't do it. I know Ken is talking.
Construction guys are.
I was gonna.
Peanut butter.
21 elected officials.
Sometimes
but
cheese questions.
not many, it's not, we're not talking
Literally.
plan here. We're talking subdivisions.
Yeah, yeah.
In some areas.
That's That was just a random.
Yeah.
Because if there's so few
It is,
voters,
my family, everyone in
then it doesn't.
all the people. Really? But the grape and jelly or grape and trouble.
Seventh District Commissioner, would you read the proposal, Ms. Say?
At section 2.02, the fourth sentence shall be deleted and replaced with the following. 6 commissioners shall continue to be elected to 4-year terms consistent with past practice. The 7th District Commissioner elected in November 2022 shall be elected to a 5-year term, after which term the 7th District Commissioner shall thereafter be elected to a 4-year terms beginning in November 2027.
One quick, I think, clerical thing we'd have to do, this could not be done till the November 2024, because the 2022 election will be when this amendment is adopted or rejected. Okay, so just a change in the timing there, I think it would go to November 2024, and then November 2029. But that makes sense to everybody? Okay. Kyle? Is it a question? I want Eric to explain it first, but.
Well, I was just going to respond to your comment, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure it would have to wait until 2024 to take effect, because the chair, the 7th District Commissioner, AKA the chairman of the BOCC, would be standing for election in 2022. And it could just be that if the amendment passes, it's a 5-year term. If it doesn't pass, it's a 4-year term like usual.
Agreed. I get it. You're a better lawyer. Thanks, Kyle.
I'm going to hire Kyle now.
Yeah, there you go. I just lost a job. Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, so this one, I think is pretty straightforward as to the intent. I do want to clear up a misconception, because I think it was, there was some misleading news coverage of summarizing this. I'm not proposing a permanent 5-year term for the chair. The only reason there's a 5-year term concept in here is to get it on the right year, and then it would be 4-year terms thereafter. But the reason for this one is there is, in my opinion, a built-in structural imbalance and unfairness in the way this is currently drafted, where the chair is up at the same time every 4 years for election as the same 3 district commissioners from districts 1, 2, and 4, the northeast part of the county, which means they cannot run for chair unless they give up their commission seat. Whereas the other 3 district commissioners are up in different years, so they have an option of retaining their seats and running for chair. And that creates a structural imbalance and unfairness in favor of the representatives and the constituents in 6, 3, and 5 at the expense of 1, 2, and 4, in my opinion. So easy fix from a wording standpoint, you just stagger the term. This is what we do in Prairie Village. It works very well for this reason. The mayor is up on an off year, half the council is up in staggered terms. And it works in a lot of other places really well as well. So, when I brought this up initially, the one comment I heard was people prefer to have the chair election in a bigger election. more turnout. I get that. I mean, it's not in the biggest election. It's not in a presidential year. I think the flip side of that, though, is when you have municipal or county elections that don't correspond with the presidential election, you tend to get voters who are more informed and more concerned and more local elections, who are the voters, as opposed to people who are, there and informed about the presidential election and maybe not so much as the down ballot. So I see that as sort of some pluses and minuses, and I'm sure opinions vary on that. The important thing for me is that there not be an inherent structural unfairness in the charter document.
Trustee Sharp or Trustee Sharp? Commissioner Sharp.
I really appreciate this proposal. I would not have gathered this disparity unless you had explained it. And so I'm trying to think of a way to communicate this amendment to voters that, a good half of our districts are at a disadvantage essentially from being able to have one of their members become the chair. And so I don't know what additional language could be here, because I definitely wouldn't have known or thought of this until you had brought it up, but it does seem to be structurally deficient.
And I would just add, I didn't suggested to me by constituents who suggested that it has made a real difference in past elections in terms of who can run and who can't. And once I thought about it and I looked at it, I agreed that the document was unfair as written.
Other comments from those in the room? Commissioner Guyana, I call you everything. I haven't pronounced your name right once, Jimmy.
Jimmy works, that's fine.
Okay.
Jimmy Gannon here, no big deal. Thanks, Chair. I just was wondering, instead of doing 5, why not do 3? I didn't know if there was a logic behind it.
Yeah, I mean, my logic, and again, I'm open to suggestion there, is I didn't want to shortchange any elected chair. I'd rather give them more than less of what the voters are giving them and what they're expecting, particularly if we do it in 2022.
But just to ask, aren't we shortchanging the other folks that want something different? So in 3 years, that would be different. So then anyone can run. Is that right? If it's in 3 years? You're just speeding up the process, right?
No, I think all the commissioners, other than the chair, they'd stay exactly the way it is now. 4-year terms. And the only thing that would change is the next election of the chair would be for a 5-year term to get them on a staggered year. And then that election would be for another 4-year term. There wouldn't be any 3-year terms.
No, I get that, but would the 3-year term do the same thing?
Well, the chair would only be there for 3 years.
Yeah, I get that, but would it not give the voters and everyone, you're getting the same thing? You're just giving the voters a chance to decide that earlier.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. If the voters say yes to, fine, yeah.
Because you're just shifting the two. I just want to make sure I'm doing the math right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the math, I'm totally open to suggestion on that. It's just as long as it's fair to all the districts is what I'm mainly after.
Questions in the room? Yes, Laura?
If we pass this one, would this go into effect with election year, this one coming up next year, or in
As proposed on November 2022, if this amendment were on the ballot and there's a chair election in November 2022, whoever is elected chair would either serve a standard 4-year term because the amendment failed, or would serve a 5-year term because the amendment passed.
Okay.
That was Kyle's point. It can't happen in 22. It can.
Okay.
It's possible in 22.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Other comments from anybody on Zoom? Go ahead, Commissioner Brownlee, and then we'll go to Zoom.
I'm not sure where the microphone is. Does state statute address this issue or impact us?
I believe that under the powers of individual counties, they have the right to fix the boundaries of each commissioner's district, provide a method for changing them from time to time, and to fix the number, term, and compensation of commissioners and their method of election. So I think it is allowable under statutes. Ms. Dunham, not here tonight, was unable to be here, but I think the statute allows each county to decide what the term of their commissioners should be and when they should be elected.
Thank you.
I don't know whether to jump in or not, Mike Boehm. If it's already allowed by the commissioners, then why do we need a charter amendment? One of my initial comments in this process was, if we're not going to the voters, I don't want to put the cleanup type things, and I know this is a little bit more important than a cleanup thing, but if this is the only thing that's moving forward, I don't know, we want to put that on an election versus, I mean, if they have the power to do it now. I'll vote yes tonight just to let's figure that out and analyze a little bit more.
I don't think that the commissioners could change this, Mayor, because it's in the charter now to have it at the same year. It's not in the state statute, but it's in the charter.
2.02, you're right. 2.02 terms of office in the home rule charter establishes the 4-year terms in even number years for the 6 district commissioners and the 7th district commissioner at large. So it's allowed by statute. It's not allowed by the home rule charter as of today. Thank you, Linda.
Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak? Please raise your hand on Zoom.
Eric, do we know of, I know Prairie Village does it this way. Are there other cities or municipalities that, or counties that you know of that, a lot of counties only have 3 commissioners, so it's, they don't have an at-large chair. So, but on governmental entities that have an at-large chair, do you know of others that do it? And how long has Prairie Village been doing this?
I don't know the answer to either question. I believe Prairie Village has been doing it as long as I can remember, maybe since the beginning. I know we have some other elected officials on council. I don't know what they do in one X. I haven't done a survey. I will probably get that information for the next meeting if this advances, but.
That I know of, only Prairie Village does it this way. And as long as I've been around, so 30 years, but I don't know how it's set up.
It's interesting because in other cities, at least in Overland Park, we have two representatives per ward. One of those is precluded from running for mayor without giving up their seat. So it happens elsewhere, but it doesn't include the full structural imbalance that you talked about, where that ward is unable to put forth a mayoral candidate. So, okay. If there are any other questions, would you like to make that motion, Eric, and somebody second?
I would make the motion again with the suggested language, but indicating the concept would mainly be what's advancing with the possibility for tweaks to the language and the numbers and the years and so forth.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Brenda Sharp. Okay, we'll go ahead and call roll.
I'm going to go through and do the ones in the room, and then I'll do Zoom since I have to mess with the phone. Wendy Bingesser.
Wendy Bingesser, yes.
That is a yes. Mike Boehm. That's a yes. Karen Brownlee.
Brownlee, yes.
That's a yes. Jane Dirks.
Yes.
Yes. Jimmy Gaona.
Yes.
That's a yes. Tedrick Hausch.
Yes.
That's a yes. Chris Eilish.
Yes.
That's a yes. Laura Klinging Smith.
Laura Klinging Smith, yes.
That's a yes. Eric Michelson. That's a yes. Don Rattan.
Yes.
That's a yes. Kyle Russell.
Yes.
That's a yes. Paula Swatch.
Yes.
That's a yes. Brenda Sharp.
Yes.
That's a yes. Greg Smith.
Yes.
That's a yes. Chair Musel.
Yes.
That's a yes. Now on Zoom, let me get it. Vicky Charlesworth.
Vicky Charlesworth, yes.
Randy Hutchins.
Yes.
Joy Costin.
Joy Costin, yes.
Brent McCune.
Brent McCune, yes.
Ed Peterson.
Ed Peterson, yes.
Leslie Riviola,
Leslie Riverola, yes.
Don Roberts,
Don Roberts, yes.
and Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, yes.
Twenty-three yeses, 0 nos.
Mayor Michelson, there would have been some that suggested that could never happen on this commission, and we're still not to second reading, but I want to congratulate you. And I think the next amendment is going to be on increasing the compensation of the Charter Commission chair. We're kind of on a roll. Now, let's get at least one more out of the way today. Laura Klingensmith's amendment on the Board of County Commissioners to approve new hires or reappointments of department directors or division heads. Would you read the exact proposal, Linda, please?
BOCC are to approve new hires or reappointments of department directors or division heads.
Laura?
Thank you. This is a rather straightforward and simple amendment. Our charter begins with the preamble of our charter starts off with "We the people of Johnson County," and I think that's just something we need to remember as we move forward with all of the amendments that we're doing. I've read all of the 567 written comments that we have received since April. The majority of these comments are about how the residents of this county want Johnson County to remain an elected form of government, not an appointed form. They've asked us to make the county manager, Department of Health, the county appraiser elected, since these non-elected officials do have quite a bit of impact in our daily lives. We've also had 2 meetings where the public has been able to come and attend and speak to us. And at both of these meetings, they asked us to listen to them. Basically, the residents of the county want to be able to hold their elected officials accountable. Currently, the Board of County Commissioners, they appoint and hire the auditor, appraiser, county manager, and chief legal counsel. And the county manager appoints and hires the remaining directors and managers. To my knowledge, these are done without any requirement. So this is something simply just to give the residents of the county reassurance that our elected officials are actually involved in the day-to-day operations, if you will, and know exactly who is being hired to run the department. Such as Karen Brownlee had mentioned earlier, we have Dr. Ariola that a lot of people are upset with. Once the pandemic hit, they've realized what his background is. I'm not sure if the current county commissioners were a part of that process or not, but this just really helps us to just listen to what they had asked us to do, which is just to make sure that they are able to hold those elected accountable.
Lori, I'm going to ask you first, is there any process now by which the Board of County Commissioners reviews the appointments of the county manager to either departments or divisions that you're aware of?
No, I'm not. That's the purview of the county manager.
Okay. And Laura, when you say department heads or division heads, how are you defining those?
I've pulled that language from the charter.
Okay.
Can we have some examples of what a department director or a division head is?
I don't have the charter, the organization chart in front of me, but just your different departments such as Department of Health, your county clerk, your treasurer, your auditor, all the different departments, whether it's a manager or a director, depending on how that particular department is organized and structured. Basically just to say, yes, come in, have a simple meeting is how I envision it. Just here's who I'd like to hire, look at their skill sets, review their resume, ask questions, and then just give the final approval.
Do you remember, Laura, where you pulled that out of the charter? I'm trying to look through. I know you don't have it in front of you. In the powers and duties of the county manager, it talks about functional divisions and departments.
1 second.
Does that sound? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you've got the sections that you reference on your submittal, 2.06
I
and
believe
5.02 and
is-
4.03, okay.
Yeah. It's in one of those sections.
5.02 is titled Department Directors. And it states the county manager shall appoint, suspend, or dismiss all non-elected department directors and division heads. So that's where it comes in.
Yep.
Okay. So your proposal is that the county manager shall appoint, but the Board of County Commissioners shall
Just
ratify or
Just
consent
a
to it?
simple approval, once that candidate's been selected by the county manager, just to hold some accountability to actually being hired to run these different departments and divisions as they reference it in the charter.
Commissioner Rattan.
Now, as I understand, the BOCC hired our auditor, and as we got mail in, we probably got 20 pieces of mail complaining that our auditor was not qualified. So I don't know if that's true or not. However, in that process that you recommend here, if the BOCC did in fact hire the auditor, but the community is unsatisfied with the hire, how does that get addressed?
That would be done at the ballot box. I mean, I would assume that when they hired the auditor, that they were following their job description and making sure that the person was qualified to be hired. And I don't know anything about that. I've received the same kind of complaints and I've not looked into it, nor have I asked about that. But that would probably help with some of these issues and that they could actually know who actually approved this appointment or hiring of this person. And remember that when they go back to reelect them.
Commissioner Iliff, Chris.
It's Cliff. It's Cliff.
Not Cliff. I know it's not Cliff.
I'm supportive of this change because I do think that although the county manager is given primary responsibility for making these hires, I do think that somebody needs to be looking over her shoulder, his or her shoulder, as the circumstances require. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I really do. Slightly off topic, I am not supportive of electing some of the offices that are now appointed for the very reason that when I went to the ballot box a couple of weeks ago, there were a whole lot of names on there that I had no idea who these people were or what their qualifications were for a wide variety of things. And anybody could run for, recorder of deeds. And if they had a pleasant sounding name, I might end up voting for them. I think that the idea that a county manager makes those selections is a good idea because they're able to vet their qualifications. And also we get candidates from all over the country as opposed to being strictly from within Johnson County. But the idea that elected officials have the final say on this, I think makes a great deal of sense.
Other comments in the room? Commissioner House.
I'm just curious how far down in the weeds a division head gets. I mean, it's just a question. We don't have to answer it today, but for me, that's part of the consideration here.
Yes, Mayor Bain.
I had the same consideration. If we could list out department heads and if newly department heads are created, add them to a list at some point, which shouldn't be in a charter, unfortunately. It should be in policies. But without more clarity on what this means, you're going to have commissioners that aren't going to know some of these people or their qualifications other than what the manager sends up to them anyway, if we get too far down in the weeds. Although to move this forward tonight with some further discussion, but I think it will change the quality of the candidate for a city manager as well, or county manager, excuse me. They're used to having control of their staff. we changed from a city administrator to a city manager after lots of discussion and angst a few years ago. Hired a new person. One of the big dialogues was the manager gets to appoint and run the city, which is what they're charged to do by the governing body. The governing body analyzes the performance of the county manager. I think you get folks that want to be in charge, want to be the president of that organization, chairman or the board, and they're going to go, I don't want to be there. And I think we'll limit the quality over time.
And I would say that I agree with you. I was kind of concerned about division heads. It's something I don't think I've seen in a long time. But this charter, is how many years old? So it may need to be updated as well, that language. So I'm fine with amending it, capturing just the true level.
Okay. Other comments? On Zoom, we have Joy Costin.
Joy, wait just 1 second. Right ahead, Joy.
Thank you. I'm only getting a little bit of an echo. Could Ms. Klingensmith please articulate again who this amendment affects? Is it just the county manager, or is it the county clerk, register of deeds, and county treasurer? I'm a little confused by that. And then also, if you could explain your comment about Dr. Ariola and his qualifications.
This would just be for the county manager. Most of the hires are directly from her, if not from the 4 that I listed that the Board of County Commissioners hires and appoints. My comment was in reference to Dr. Ariola. It was in conjunction with what Karen Brownlee had said earlier, and that a lot of people have been concerned about his qualifications, that we have been in a pandemic with a non-physician making medical decisions for the county. I've received lots of emails about this, as well as that's been something that's been talked about at the BOCC and other places. So this would just make sure that should he be reappointed or rehired, I'm not sure if he's appointed or hired, but either way, that they actually would take a look at his qualifications and make sure that he is the perfect person for that, best person suited to serve our community.
So in looking at the qualifications that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joy, are you done?
Wait.
No, can I make a comment? Hello, can you hear me?
We're coming back to you, Joy.
Okay.
There you go, Joy.
Well, I just wanted to point out that on the Johnson County government website, it clearly identifies Dr. Ariola's vast experience in environmental health, in teaching pediatric medicine, in Masters of Science in Public Health. I mean, he has this amazing vita. So I'm a little curious what criteria you're really trying to hold him up to when he has a life in public health service. Public health is very different than other lines of medical medical scholarship. So it just seems to me that it's maybe not in alignment with what you're trying to create here, because from my point of view, he has quite a profound background in the very thing that we needed.
Well, this amendment isn't specific for him. This is for moving forward for any and all directors that are hired by the Board of County Commissioners, just to give oversight to what the county manager is hiring, to make sure that those that we are electing are actually knowing what's going on within all the departments of the county.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Russell?
I'm not sure who the right person to direct this question is, but I am a little bit confused about the word reappointment. I don't know how many of, how it works. My understanding, and it could be wrong, but my understanding, department directors are just hired and they're not appointed for a specific period of time and then need to be reappointed. But I could be wrong. If there's anybody that needs to be reappointed after a certain period of time. Is that the case, or is everybody just hired until they're fired or retire or resign?
Department directors are all hired. So there is no term, no reappointment.
More comments from Zoom?
And just to answer your question, Kyle, in the 5.02, it says shall appoint, suspend, or dismiss any and all elected. So that's where I pulled it from. So there might need to be clarification from the county as whether they're all hired or appointed. I was just simply pulling language from the charter.
Okay, now we have Ed Peterson.
Question would, if adopted, would this have an effect on ongoing management and oversight of these positions and or termination of employees in these positions?
No, I just feel that the termination would be handled through the HR department, not the Board of County. They would be involved in all of that, as well as the county commission. This is really just a simple way to assure the people that came and spoke to us. And we're just providing a little bit of reassurance that those people that we are hiring to run these very important departments are qualified, and that they have actually vetted them out as well, if you will, seen their resumes, seen their qualifications, and just kind of do a little stamp of approval on their hiring.
Laura, you're really looking at the front end?
Yep.
Not putting the Board of County Commissioners in continuing evaluation of employees, oversight, or
Just more
discipline termination?
oversight. Yeah, absolutely.
If I may,
I've got somebody else on Zoom real quick.
Ed, were you done? Now we have Vicki Charlesworth.
I just think that this proposal is a little bit redundant in that if the Board of County Commissioners are dissatisfied with the people that the county manager is hiring, they have the authority to, they have oversight of the county manager. And then that they already have oversight of that. So I just think it's a little redundant.
Thank you, Vicki. We're going to go to Mayor Schwalk and then to somebody Iliff.
As Commissioner Klingon-Smith was making her original remarks, she indicated that she thought the BOCC should, quote, be involved in day-to-day operations. And in my mind, the whole purpose of the current structure is to have the Board of County Commissioners as a policy-making board that hires the attorneys, the auditor, and the county manager. This is akin to a city manager form of government. And to involve the commissioners in the day-to-day operations would decimate the very structure itself. You can't have both at the same time, or you have a different form of government. And I don't know that, Commissioner, if you meant to go that far.
I don't mean for it to be that, just as simple when the county manager wants to hire a new person. Let's say someone retires and they've got a new position open, they either promote from within or hire from outside. That this is just simply a way that the county commissioners are aware of who's coming in to run that department. Just as Chris Iliff said much better than I did, just more of an oversight. Just to give reassurance to the people that came and spoke to us, that have written to us, that there is just a little bit of oversight being done on the county commissioner, or the county manager. That is a huge position with a lot of responsibility. And it's nothing more than just a simple, here's who I'd like to hire, here's their qualifications. Just as simple as that.
Mayor Boehm and then Jimmy Gaona.
I'm debating myself back and forth on this one. I agree with Mayor Schwach. I guess I've settled on, if it moves forward, I want positions listed. I think that the recourse is to the county manager from the commission. If you want to make it as simple as what you want to, then she notifies, in this case, or the manager notifies, not puts for approval. I don't think this belongs in the charter. This belongs in policy. I would consider a recommendation, if I were you, to potentially move that forward and let them read that and set policies that would allow that or encourage that, whatever it might be. I don't think it belongs in the charter.
Thanks, Mayor. Jimmy Gaona here. I too am kind of trying to understand, see both sides, and I do. And I think, in my opinion, strictly my opinion, there's a room for consensus. If it's not approval, but ratification and acknowledgement. So even if all commissioners vote no, the county manager has that right. That's what that powers have been given to him or her. And so they understand where we all sit. And I think that gives some understanding to the public, to the folks that says, hey, what did my commissioner vote for? And so I think in the end, that would be more of a ratification or an announcement or presenting. I don't know what that's called in government, but I would call that more of, here's how I stood on this issue. And it's just, here's how I stood on this hire. That somewhere like that. Because I think the approval part does kind of get us in a really gray area.
Mayor Michelson and then Commissioner Smith.
I'm just going to add I'm torn on this one too. I see this as potentially compromising the efficiency of what has historically been a very well-run organization, in my opinion, and potentially politicizing it and getting a new appointee off on the wrong foot with commissioners who vote in the minority against him or her and so forth. But I also see, the value of, at least if it's limited to the very top, very few department heads, of having some, I kind of like Commissioner Gaona's concept. So I don't know how, I'm skeptical that this is a charter amendment. I'll say that, but I may be voting to advance it, just further consideration. If it does advance, I would suggest, Chair, I personally would love to hear from current county manager and or a commissioner or two with their views on this. I don't know, but I'd love their opinions on this before I voted, if possible. Just throw that out there. Thanks.
I suggest that if we hear from commissioners, we'll hear from all 7 of them, no matter what. But I understand what you're talking about. Commissioner Sharp.
I would say, I think we did hear from, I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Greg, I'm sorry.
Renee, go ahead.
No, I appreciate the discussion. It's been interesting. Some things have been brought up that I hadn't thought of, but I guess overall on this is no different than advisor consent in the US Constitution or in the Kansas Constitution. Elected officials, governors, presidents can't just say, yep, you got the job. It's just providing an oversight function with the BOCC, and I like that.
Brenda.
I was just going to say, I think we did hear from all of the commissioners and the county manager who did not recommend any changes as what is being discussed in this particular amendment, to my recollection from the invitations that we had in our meetings with them.
Tedrick?
Just to concur, I understand the concept, but I tend to agree with Mayor Swak that whether even if you have a straw vote and they all vote no, but it has no effect. To me, that's just an easy out, or makes it politicized and makes it more difficult. Makes the county manager make the difficult decision. I guess one solution, if we were to do it, would be require a supermajority vote of 5 or something. But to me, this is why you hire a county manager. And if the county manager makes bad decisions in this regard, you change the county manager.
Other comments in the room? Any other comments on Zoom? Anybody have their hand up? Nope. I'll weigh in with this thought. I believe that conceptually and hypothetically and in the right circumstance, this should work and could work. But what we have seen throughout municipal and county government is political challenges to professional staff. And that makes our professional staff work differently and less professionally, in my opinion, and less willing to give an independent opinion. So I'm concerned that this would, if there's a vote and there's one vote against, then that new professional staff member has an issue going into it. And I think it will change the dynamics of who you get in those positions. And as Mayor Boehm said, who you will get to be county manager. So I'm not leaning to support this at this point, although I think it sounds like it may get to second reading and we can tweak it. Okay, Jimmy, final comment?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, Jimmy Gaglione here. I can understand your point of view. I also say if I'm going for a job, I may not win over every interviewer. And it's okay if I get that feedback, then maybe I can learn what I need to do better and challenge myself as an employee to figure out how I can do better. I don't know complete public government. I get it. I'm out in the workforce. It's a little different. So I just can see both sides of your comment. That's what I wanted to say.
This was easy. We wouldn't be getting paid the big bucks.
We have one more.
Commissioner Rattan?
I don't know quite the process, but I'm assuming that the county manager is not interviewing alone and possibly brings in some people from the department, HR, et cetera, the people who should be involved in that interview. I think, again, if we've hired the county manager, we should trust the county manager. And what's important for me, when I've managed employees, it's the get through the door, but it's ongoing performance management. It's really what counts. Is it that person, like you said, is hired until they leave the company? Do they continue to deliver what we expect them to deliver? Because an interview is a point in time.
All right, any other comments before we get a motion and a vote? If not, Laura, would you like to make your motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to advance this amendment to include just here to have considered the Board of County Commissioners to approve new hires for the department directors.
Is there a second? Wendy? Okay, we're ready for the vote and we're right at 6 o'clock. So this will be our last item. And I'll talk about what we're going to do next meeting once we get the vote.
Again, I will go through the people that are here and then I will go on to Zoom. Wendy Bingesser.
Wendy Bengesser, yes.
That's a yes. Mike Boehm. That's a no. Karen Brownlee.
Brownlee, yes.
That's a yes. Jane Dirks.
Yes.
That's a yes. Jimmy Gaglione.
Jimmy Gaglione, yes.
That's a yes. Tedrick Hausch.
No.
That's a no. Chris Iliff.
Yes.
That's a yes. Laura Klinging Smith.
Yes.
That's a yes. Eric Michelson. That's a yes. Don Rattan. That's a no. Kyle Russell. That's a no. Paula Schwab.
No.
That's a no. Brenda Sharp.
No.
That's a no. Greg Smith. That's a yes. Chair Musel.
No.
That's a no. Now I'll go on to Zoom. Vicki Charlesworth.
Vicki Charlesworth, no.
Randy Hutchins.
Randy Hutchins, yes.
Joy Costin.
Joy Costin, no.
Brent McCune.
Brent McCune is a no.
Ed Peterson.
Ed Peterson, no.
Leslie Riviola.
Leslie Riverola is a no.
Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, no.
Greg Shelton,
Greg Shelton, no.
we had 9 yeses and 14 nos.
That moves on to second reading. So we are at our appointed time to close tonight. The next meeting is December 6th. We will take up the 3 amendments that deal with partisan versus nonpartisan elections. The first will be regarding the changing the election status of the sheriff from partisan to nonpartisan. The second will be to change the format of all county elections from nonpartisan to partisan. Well, everything to partisan. And then the third bullet point on the agenda is related to that as well, which would ask for the district attorney and the sheriff to be elected in a nonpartisan election. So these are all the partisan, nonpartisan issues. I will let you know that it is the opinion of the legal counsel for the county, Cindy Dunham, that we cannot change the election status of the district attorney. The district attorney is a state position, not a county position, and is within the state statutes to be elected on a partisan basis. If anybody has a specific question and wants to discuss that further with Cindy or me, please let me know. But otherwise, based on that, I do not intend to put before us the question of the district attorney. The sheriff is something that we can do as a charter commission. And then the commissioners to moving from nonpartisan to partisan, this charter commission has the power to propose that amendment. We didn't get through everything today. What a silly thought. But this has been good discussion and interesting. And I hope those who are watching it understand how diligent everybody is being in keeping an open mind to try to think about the nuances and the unintended consequences and intended consequences of various amendments. So everybody have a good Thanksgiving, and we will see everybody on December 6th.
Sure.
If you are, yes.
The meeting on December 6th is at KU Edwards campus, the BEST conference again. So we are back over there on December 6th at 4 p.m.
And I want to, if you're the proponent of a proposal that has reached second reading, I would encourage you as soon as possible, hopefully before Thanksgiving, to put some thought into more specific final language. Even if there are options in it, so that we have something that we can get out to the commission before the amendment or the agenda goes out, that people can think about and provide individual feedback maybe to proponents. So we don't want to get in here where we're wordsmithing and amending and trying to make sausage right here in the room. So Commissioner Sharp?
Just to clarify, we will be voting up and down on language as at that reading.
Well,
No?
the second reading, our rules say we will not act at the second reading. So on December 6th, we're going to get through as many second readings as we can. And I think we've discussed a lot of them here, so maybe we won't need more time like we initially thought. But then at the December, whatever the next meeting is in December, that's when we will vote on anything that was, where second reading was concluded on December 6th.
So would you contemplate additional opportunities to edit and amend and change the language again after the second reading before the vote?
We don't have that in our rules. I'm open. I don't want us doing a lot of amendments on the final vote. So hopefully at the time of second reading, we end up with something that is in final form that can be voted on at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Is that everybody kind of, I'm seeing lots of affirmative nods of heads. So let's try to do that if we're a proponent. Yes.
Same question, will we have Sheriff's Department staff available at KU Edwards?
Yes.
campus?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments for the good of the order, Jimmy? The move that we adjourn. Senator Brownlee seconds. Everybody's enthusiastic. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Motion carried. We are adjourned.